Hello to everyone. I'm Daniel, and right now you're about to join me on yet another Arkham Horror Rules Roundup video. In the first video, I gave you 15 rules that make the game easier, and last time I just went over timing rules, specifically looking at survivor cards. This time, I don't have a cool theme. It's just 10 more rules that you should know while playing the game. And when I say you should know, I definitely do not mean that you should already know them, because they are not obvious at all. Anyways, while some of them are ways the designers intended on making things difficult for you, others are going to work out in your favor. But either way, you might be playing some of these situations incorrectly, so let's get started and clear things up. Number 1 is about healing effects. Unless otherwise stated, when the game says to heal, they mean healing damage or horror off your own investigator card only. I see a lot of people make this mistake because, well, it's not in the rules reference. But it's more or less clear when comparing a few cards, like with these core set cards. Fearless just says heal 1 horror with no other information. First Aid level 0, however, says heal 1 damage or horror from an investigator at your location, so this means we're allowed to heal from other investigator cards too, and Fearless can't because it doesn't say that. The level 3 version of First Aid now allows us to heal from ally assets as well. The game is pretty restrictive about healing, so keep that in mind when you put healing into your deck. This is especially relevant with Vincent Lee, who has a weakness that comes into play with damage on it. You can discard the Wounded Bystander only if you heal all of the damage off of it, and it turns out that's pretty difficult at level 0. That First Aid from before doesn't even help, and although the level 3 version could, it's not a great solution. Your best bet at level 0 is Bizarre Diagnosis, which can clear off all the damage that Wounded Bystander starts with. Again, the only cards that can remove damage from Wounded Bystander are those that specifically say they can heal from ally assets. And there's nothing else in the Scarlet Keys box besides Bizarre Diagnosis, Surgical Kit, and Vincent Lee's own Elder Sign that can do it. Before moving on, here is the FAQ entry that clarifies what heal means. On a related note, number 2 is trauma. There are a lot of ways to get trauma, but mechanically all it means is that you begin every scenario with damage and horror on your investigator card equal to your physical and mental trauma. So let's say Vincent Lee has 2 physical trauma. He'd start the scenario looking like this. Any cards that ask about how much remaining health or sanity you have is calculated as usual. Here, Vincent Lee has 7 remaining health. And finally, this is the part that many people miss, damage and horror can still be healed as usual. In Vincent's case, the trauma is a benefit because it gives him something to heal at the very beginning of the game, so he can pick up the On the Mend skill cards from the get-go. I couldn't find any rules reference or FAQ entry that talks about this. All that the section on trauma says is that you begin with the damage and horror. There's nothing special about that damage or horror, so there's no reason to think that you can't heal it. Now for something different, number 3 is about tokens. We're starting to see some of the missteps in the keywords in Arkham Horror the card game. Take a look at Grotesque Statue. It says that when you would reveal a Chaos token, reveal 2 tokens instead of 1, and then choose 1 to resolve and ignore the other one. Let's say I'm using Shriveling to fight, and I use Grotesque Statue, and I reveal a Skull and a 0 token. I'll choose to resolve the 0, so I pass the test, and now Shriveling says if a Skull is revealed, take 1 horror. Well, did I reveal a Skull? Grotesque Statue says reveal 2 tokens, so it would seem plausible that I did reveal a Skull, but the rules say no, I did not reveal the Skull because I ignored it. Alright, fine. How about a different situation with Baseball Bat? It says that if I reveal a Skull token, I have to discard it after the attack resolves. Let's make certain that this doesn't happen by committing Defiance, which says ignore the effects of the chosen symbol. We'll pick Skull during the test. Surely, that should keep the bat from breaking. It turns out that no, Defiance does not cancel or ignore the Skull token. It only partially ignores it. Only the effects and modifiers are ignored, and those are all found on the scenario reference card. Discarding the baseball bat is not an effect of the skull token. It's an effect of the baseball bat card itself. No entry in the FAQ on this one, but there is a ruling from the developers on Arkham DB that you can check out here. Speaking of revealing things, there is a little bit of confusion about the term revelation. You only need to trigger revelation effects on cards from the encounter deck or on weaknesses when you draw them. I know, it sounds like you should resolve them when you reveal the card because, revelation, but the game is specifically looking for when you draw the card or add it to your hand in some way. So, if there's some effect that lets you look at or discards cards from the encounter deck or from your deck, and you see one of these, nothing happens. Here is the relevant ruling. Okay, moving on to number 5, which is all about searching for targets. When you are instructed to search for a card, you are allowed to look at all of the cards in the searched area and pick whichever one you would like. So, for Mysterious Chanting here, you're allowed to look through the entire discard pile and encounter deck and find whichever cultist you want to draw. And you can pick whichever one is the most advantageous to you too. Some people think that they're supposed to apply the Grim Rule and pick out the worst one, but that's not what the Grim Rule says. The Grim Rule is only for resolving rules you're not sure of while you're playing the game, so you don't waste a bunch of time trying to look things up. Anyways, On the Hunt is similar, but you just get to look in the top 9 cards of the encounter deck. Looking for that juicy victory point enemy? Go for it. Want a swarm of rats instead? All yours. Arcane Initiate lets you look through the top 3 cards of your own deck for a spell, but just a reminder here that if the only spell you see is a weakness, probably you're playing Agnes Baker and it's Dark Memory, you must take it. Here are the relevant rules. Next up is the Per Investigator Symbol. It refers to the number of players who started the game, so unfortunately if someone is defeated or resigns, the health on the Ghoul Priest doesn't change. If 3 people started the game, the Ghoul Priest will have 15 health no matter what. And you'll still put out the original number of clues on locations, and yes, you'll still have to spend a whole lot of clues to advance the act. So try not to be defeated, it certainly makes things harder on the remaining players. Here's the rules reference on this symbol, highlighting the part about player elimination. Number 7 is a look at another symbol, the reaction symbol. It's optional. All triggered abilities are optional, and the reaction symbol is no exception. People often treat this as being forced, but it's not. So if you have Roland's cover-up out, you don't have to take the clues off of his weakness instead of discovering clues. Here's a few more reactions that you might want to ignore. This Historical Society location lets you pick up an extra clue at the cost of 2 horror. And this last one from the first scenario in the Circle Undone seems pretty dangerous too. You can make sure an enemy spawns with you instead of someone else, but you'll get attacked. Don't forget that you can't trigger these abilities if you're not at these locations. The rules reference isn't exactly explicit about these being optional, but there is a may sitting right there. Number 8 is a big one. You cannot combine actions or certain triggered abilities. I see a lot of newer players or players who haven't picked up the game in a while forgetting about this. Let's say you have lockpicks in play. If you want to investigate using lockpicks, you spend your action to activate the investigation printed on the card, which gives you the agility bonus to your skill value. If you also had Flashlight in play, you cannot use Flashlight's ability to reduce Shroud at the same time. That would be activating Flashlight's ability, and you could do that on a separate investigation action, but not with lockpicks. Same is true for events. Burning the Midnight Oil is its own investigation action, which also is modified by giving you 2 resources. You can't combine it with either lockpicks or Flashlight on the same action. You could, of course, commit the card from your hand to the test, but it will only contribute the skill icons on the side of the card and not any of the text. That said, some cards do let you combine their abilities. Let's say I really did want to get Flashlight's Shroud Reduction ability while I used lockpicks. I could upgrade to Flashlight level 3 which no longer has an activate symbol on it. It's now a reaction triggered ability that says when you perform a skill test while investigating. So I can use lockpicks and also spend a supply from Flashlight 3 to combine these effects. Magnifying Glass is another good example of an ability that stacks with other cards. I get the +1 intellect while investigating, whether that's using a basic investigate action or the bold investigate designator on lockpicks, burning the midnight oil, or anything else. Oh man, I've been putting this one off for a while, but let's do it. Number 9 is about automatic evasion, which does not count as a successful evasion. Okay, what are we talking about? Some cards let you automatically evade an enemy. Take a look at Cheap Shot here. It's a fight skill test that if you happen to succeed by 2 or more, one of the results of the skill test, in addition to dealing 1 damage, is that you get to automatically evade the attacked enemy. That is, it becomes disengaged and exhausted. The issue is when you look at cards like Pickpocketing Level 2. It has the reaction, after you evade an enemy, draw 1 card, or gain 1 resource. But if you succeeded by 2 or more, do both instead. So, with Cheap Shot, you are indeed evading an enemy, so you can choose to draw 1 card or gain 1 resource. But you did not succeed by 2, so you cannot do both. You didn't succeed by anything in your evasion, really, since there was no evade skill test involved. You succeeded by 2 on the fight test. Now, the templating on Pickpocket is kind of bad here, but the real point is that automatic evasions are not skill tests, and you cannot check how many points you succeeded by, or even that it was successful or not. The first time most people cared about this was when the Forgotten Age was first released, and this persistent enemy showed up. It has the text, after the Harbinger of Illusia is successfully attacked or evaded, place 1 resource on it. So the question came up, does something like Cunning Distraction place 1 resource token on the Harbinger of Illusia? Well, no. The developers clarified that in the FAQ it says, I'll read this one aloud, quote, if an ability automatically evades 1 or more enemies, this is not the same thing as automatically succeeding at an evasion attempt. As per the entry on evade in the rules reference, if an ability automatically evades 1 or more enemies, no skill test is made for the evasion attempt whatsoever. Consequently, because no skill test is made, it is not considered a successful evasion. The investigator simply follows the steps for evading an enemy, exhausting it and breaking its engagement. End quote. I think I know where the confusion comes from. Let's take another example that is hopefully not controversial. Let's say there's an obscuring fog on your location. Its forced effect says, after attached location is successfully investigated, discard obscuring fog. Okay, let's say I play Working a Hunch. It says, discover 1 clue at your location. Do I get to discard obscuring fog? No, because I did not successfully investigate. I just bypassed an investigation skill test by jumping right to discovering a clue. If there's no skill test involved, you can't succeed at 1. Now, my guess is that the evade terminology is needlessly confusing. Let's compare the names of the skill test types with the normal results of said skill tests. As we just saw, if you take an investigate skill test and succeed, you'll discover 1 clue. But you can also discover clues with other cards without a test. If you take a fight skill test, you'll deal 1 damage to that enemy. But you can also deal 1 damage using other card effects like Small Favor or Mano a Mano. The designers did a good job of keeping the terminology separate here, but when it comes to evading, evade is both the name of the type of skill test and also the word used for the result. Something like the Harbinger of Illusia, among other cards, is really just looking for you taking an evade test, not simply looking for the result of said test. Evade, as a result, really is just shorthand for disengage and exhaust, which is already problematic. They probably should have come up with a different term for one of these possibilities, like trip or distract. Okay, enough with that one. The last one, number 10, is easy. The designers use Limit 1 in a variety of ways to put restrictions on the players. I already covered limit once per in the last video, but this time we'll just take a look at limit 1 per investigator. This shows up on cards like Lone Wolf and Dark Horse, and it just means that you can have only one of them in play in front of you. But you can have more than one copy in your deck. If you're only allowed to have one in your deck, the game uses limit 1 per deck instead, like on Hollowed Mirror. There's a couple of other related things I should mention. The exceptional keyword on cards like Stick to the Plan and Double Double also means limit 1 per deck, in addition to doubling its XP cost. And finally, have you noticed the little star in front of Leo DeLuca's name? This means unique, and there are special rules for these cards. Only one person can have Leo DeLuca out, and you can have only one copy out as well. You can't even play another copy from your hand to get rid of the old copy. But as with limit 1, you are allowed to have multiple copies in your deck, and you're allowed to discard the second copy or commit it to a skill test. Okay, that is the end of this rules roundup video. I hope you learned something new about the rules. If I made any mistakes, or if there's a confusing rule that you think I should cover in another video, drop a comment down below. And stay tuned for more rules videos in the future, and of course, check out more Arkham Horror content on my channel in the meantime, and I'll see you in the next one.